And at 10, Clara Afton. The name of Clara Afton has got to be one of the most annoying things in FNAF to me, because nobody treats it like a theory despite it being all that it is. Not even a theory, a hypothesis. The whole Clara Afton thing is just very outlandish to me. Just because there's a name doesn't mean it belongs to anyone. Does that mean that the crying child's name is Vlad because the purple character was named Vlad, or is that William's new name because he was supposed to be purple, right? It's certainly a possibility that her name is Clara, but to me it just doesn't make sense. If we're going to say that the character from The Immortal and the Restless who is named Clara is meant to represent the mother, fine, but my issue is why isn't Vlad named William if Clara is named Clara? He's not named William, so we can't assume that Clara is the mother's name. It wouldn't make sense. I also believe that Clara represents perhaps a mistress or the woman that William didn't want to let into his life after he lost his children, who he may have had another child with, but he didn't want to adopt it or accept it because he had lost so much already, and that's why the whole, the baby isn't mine, that's where that comes from. And at 9, Ballora. There's also a theory that Mrs. Afton goes on to possess Ballora, however I don't like this theory either. Many people who associate the name Clara with Mrs. Afton also seem to believe that she went on to possess Ballora. The reason I don't like this theory is that it assumes too much, okay? It assumes that she was alive when he made the robots, it assumes that she ended up dying in some agonizing way or at all when we really don't know what happened to her, and it also assumes that she was around Ballora when she died, or that a possessed object was somehow used when creating Ballora, which would be an incredible chain of events since we know William didn't know about Remnant at the time he was making the Funtime animatronics. And if Mrs. Afton did end up possessing Ballora, I'm sure William wouldn't have opened up Circus Babies. And if her death was the reason he had started killing, which we still don't know about, we have no idea why he started killing, but if that was the reason, then seeing a possessed Ballora animatronic with his wife's spirit would actually probably help him. He wouldn't have to kill out of grief because she wasn't really gone. Like, let's be honest, okay? It was in a dummy thick body, no less, so he would have had hella fun with that. Especially when her song can be in reference to another woman in his life, when Ballora's song can be in reference to a different woman in his life, since I doubt that he would have hid inside his walls from his wife, because they would have been her walls too. Even metaphorically speaking. And it ain't Mrs. Emily. Another theory suggests that perhaps instead of his own wife, that the mother of his children wasn't his to begin with at all. That perhaps instead William's children are the result of him either previously being married to or having extramarital relations with none other than Mrs. Emily, Henry's wife and the mother to Charlotte, the puppet. It would also explain a couple things. Why he kills Charlotte first outside of Fredbear's family diner for starters. If that's the daughter of the man who stole his wife and his ex-wife, that would certainly cause some serious issues in his brain, and it would also explain the whole "the baby isn't mine" thing from The Immortal and the Restless. Perhaps his wife was trying to convince Afton that Charlotte was actually his child, but he wouldn't believe it, and again, the whole first kill thing. It's very important when trying to determine behavior of a serial killer to find out why they killed their first victim. If she was a constant reminder of his wife leaving him for another man, it would certainly make sense. And if he was trying to build up the courage to kill her, realizing that she was his child is probably not a good thing, hence the denial. And at 7, intentional. There is no doubt that the Circus Baby animatronic was made to scoop and grab kids, hence why William warned his daughter and son to stay away from it. But of course, like children do, that only made them want to see her more, at least in Elizabeth's case. And William should have known that. He would have had to know that his kids wouldn't listen and instead get closer, right? Well, maybe he did. Maybe the scooping that took Elizabeth's life was intentional and not a tragic accident after all. I mean, hey, it's possible. Maybe Elizabeth saw something that she didn't quite understand and William didn't want her figuring it out later in life. Or maybe he had a theory about possession before this moment and wanted to test it. Or maybe he wanted to immortalize his daughter in an animatronic that was made specifically for her. I mean, if it was an accident, William would be pissed, and that would send him into a spiral that would have surely gotten him caught. So how did he keep his cool? Because he knew it was going to happen. And at 6, the beginning. The origins of William Afton is something the games have very much left unexplored. Anytime we see an event in this series, it was while William was killing. We never really, to our knowledge at least, see him before he's on his murderous path. So, what gives? What's his origin? Why did he start killing? I mean, at this point we know more about Rick Sanchez, and that's saying something. I mean, he literally started this season of Rick and Morty saying, "Don't establish a canonical backstory with me." Either way, what could have possibly triggered this kind of reaction? Now, I'm no profiler, but my sister watches a lot of Criminal Minds and I've seen all of Bones, so I am nowhere near close to qualified. There could be many things. The death of his wife, divorce, hell, maybe a bad song played on the radio. But while we may not know what it is, we do know what it can't be. We know that the death of his children cannot be the reason he started killing. Since Elizabeth got scooped by Baby, he was built to be a murder robot, and Crying Child saw it happen, hence the nightmare animatronics and the empty girls room in FNAF 4. We know that nothing else happens to these kids as far as we've seen, and we have no idea about the mother or the baby mama of these kids, but maybe there wasn't one to begin with. Halfway through in at number 5, kidnapping. Now, this is one of Amanda's theories and she seems dead set on it. So what if the Afton kids were kidnapped? What if they were never William's kids to begin with? I mean, it would explain a few things. Why there's no mother, first of all, because while yes, you need to have a female to have a biological child, your kids don't have to be biological. So could William have kidnapped them? Maybe. I mean, he does keep a hell of an eye on them, installing cameras everywhere as evidenced by his psychic friend Fredbear plushes that we can see in basically every screen of the FNAF 4 minigames, and it would also explain the line of "the baby isn't mine" from The Immortal and the Restless, despite the kid looking exactly like his father and even becoming a bat. Like we hear Michael say in his final speech, "They didn't recognize me at first, but then they thought I was you." Michael looks exactly like William, but Vlad kept insisting that the baby isn't mine. Could this be the case with his children? Maybe something to chew on. Getting close to the end in number 3, psychopath. Then there's the possibility that she's just a psychopath as well. However, it doesn't mean that she was committed to the same goals as him. Maybe she just wanted to go nuts and kill as many adults as she could, but William was like, "No, babe, we gotta kill the younglings like Anakin." Or she was just the inspiration behind his delirious schemes. Maybe she was the one who gave William the idea about finding the answer to life and death, and the closer the kid was to the beginning of life, the more answers he would get. I mean, it's a stretch and it has no evidence, but hey, just like Clara Afton. But like in my Comic Sans brain, it's not that bad of an idea, right? It's still within the realm of possibility. The possibilities with a character we know nothing about are endless, with anything being possible. Like perhaps William started killing after she died because he wanted to complete her goal, or there was supposed to be some ritual that he wanted to use to bring her back or something that she told him about. She could be like a freaking witch, for all we know. But ultimately, and in number 2, the reason. What if Mrs. Afton was the catalyst to all of this? What if she was the one who pushed William over the edge, gave him the ideas, gave him the kids, and then vanished, or died, or left him, whatever the case may be? What if Mrs. Afton was the one behind it all? I mean, honestly, a combination of these theories from this list could be true. She could have been a psycho who was just a hallucination after she died and possessed Ballora. There's so much in the realm of possibility here that we can never really be certain unless we get told directly by Scott, or whoever takes over next. But perhaps William was driven to killing by his wife, be it directly or because of her death or their split or because she was just horrible to him. It would explain why he doesn't want to hurt his kids despite being a certified nutcase. But the closest kid to William other than his own kids would have been Charlotte, hence why she was first. If the mother died or divorced him, his children would be the last things that he had that connected him to the love of his life. So it would make sense why he would try to protect them and shut down when they got killed, resulting in him building a third one to try and keep that tiny part of his wife alive. I think there's still some potential here, but I'm not going to say that I believe anything until it's confirmed, because people are going to get mad at me either way.
Number 10, Crying Child's fate. Possibly Evan's fate would be an appropriate title of this as well, assuming that Evan is actually the true name for CC. Crying Child meets a terrifying end. This poor victim, and likely also offspring of William Afton's, ends up having his birthday at Fredbear's and is seemingly tormented by his older brother during it. Though really, why Crying Child is such a fan of Fredbear's when the animatronics terrify him, I don't really get that. But I guess that's also a lot of the FNAF fanbase, who like to be scared, so maybe CC is scared too but is also a fan? I don't know. Either way, Crying Child's brother decides the best way to tease him is to take him up to the stage and lift him up to give Fredbear a big kiss. His brother and his friends stick Cece's head in the animatronic, but something goes awfully wrong, and the animatronic bear chomps down on Cece's head, crushing it. While Cece does survive the accident, he never fully recovers and shortly after dies as a result of his injuries. Number 8. Circus Baby. After her death at the hands of Circus Baby, Elizabeth would actually become one with the animatronic, with her soul possessing it and going on to live within that animatronic. Elizabeth's soul would then become trapped within Circus Baby. In Sister Location, it seemed as though the knowledge of his sister's fate was what inspired Michael Afton to get a job at the underground facility, in hopes of freeing her. It's unclear whether Michael was doing this of his own volition, or whether he was compelled to do so by his father William.
And at 7, doesn't exist. Is it possible that there was no Mrs. Afton to begin with? That William was already crazy and had created these delusions of being in love with a woman whom he made into a robot and having kids who he ended up adopting as a single father, but since he's the owner of a large company like Fazbear Entertainment, I'm sure it would be fairly easy. And with all his connections, perhaps he'd be able to skip a psych eval even if they had one back in the 80s. This would also pull into question the whole animatronics thought that Michael was William at first line from Sister Location, but I mean, hey, there's always the possibility that Mike has been a robot rebuilt in William's image so that he could have a son that actually ended up looking like him, you know? And it could be like, oh well, I donated some love juice in my 20s so I could make a little cash and it turns out I have a son. You know, that kind of situation. The mother passes away so the son gets sent to live with his new family. Explains the whole bullying the younger brother to the point of his death thing as well, but I mean he would also still be a robot and I don't know. And at 6, death. There are plenty of theories around what happened to Mrs. Afton. A lot of people believe that she is dead, and honestly, that probably is the most likely scenario. But the interesting thing about these theories comes from how she could have died. A lot of people think that Mrs. Afton died in a car accident, and I mean, it's definitely a possibility, but that doesn't mean it's canon, despite how many people will insist that it is. It still came from a FNAF music video, created by a fan. There are also others that think William killed her, or that she just left him because she found out what he was into, but then for some reason left his prime demographic with him, but maybe it's because they were his kids, she knew he wouldn't do anything. Some also think that she died in a plane crash. Basically, any form of death that you can think of is the way that Mrs. Afton could have gone. Hell, even Sugar Mama who dies of natural causes can be the way that Mrs. Afton went. We can't know for sure. Okay, well technically we can assume that she was under 40 at the time of his children being born if they are biologically Williams, and therefore rule out the whole Sugar Mama thing. But William still had to get the money to start a business or buy a business somehow, right? So maybe William had a Sugar Mama. Hashtag Afton Sugar Mama. There we go. That's the new thing. That's him. That's my headcanon. That's my AU. Is that what the kids say? And at 4, surrogate. What if the missus who had these babies didn't actually have any relation to William at all? And by that I mean like relations. And instead was simply a means to an end and their only interaction was in essence a business transaction. Surrogacy is becoming more and more common, with women being unable to get pregnant due to infertility or health issues that would come with having a baby, like Kim Kardashian for instance. But it wasn't really all that common back in the 80s as far as I could tell. I mean, I can't be sure, I wasn't alive then, and if you did need it, I'm sure it would have cost a lot. Assuming that William was already making money off of Fazbear Entertainment and Circus Baby's Entertainment and Rental, maybe he decided that he wanted a kid, so he paid someone to be artificially inseminated, which could explain the whole "the baby isn't mine" line from Vlad, since this kind of procedure could result in William not associating his genes with the kid since he didn't go through the whole process, I guess you can say. Like, he didn't really get the fun part, and like the dopamine release certainly helps with building a connection, especially when trying for a baby. I mean, like, at least I'd assume so. Like, I'm not sure. I don't have any children. Despite other jokes I may have made on this channel, I don't have any children. Hey, even though apparently some of my TikToks are an issue of minor safety when it's just me, so maybe I am the child and I just don't know it. Maybe I haven't been alive for 22 years, and instead I time traveled to years in the past. without knowing.
Number 3. Springtrap. Another very dark truth is that William Afton went on to become the monster known as Springtrap. Springtrap is the main antagonist of FNAF 3, where you are a security guard at a sort of haunted house / museum, created to profit off of the terrible and tragic events that seem to destroy Freddy Fazbear's Pizza and seemingly the reputation of Fazbear Entertainment's reputation besides. William Afton was chased by the spirits of his victims who had come to possess the animatronic suits. He chose to hide in a spring-lock Bonnie suit, but water coming into contact with it caused the spring locks to loosen, malfunction, and they tore through William's organs and body, presumably, trapping him within the suit and in theory, killing him. Though of course he seems pretty lively in FNAF 3 as the only true and physical antagonist. And I believe that's after 30 years of him being like sort of locked away, so I guess he's like a spirit possessing the animatronic, or he's still alive. I have a lot of questions. Number 2. Stitch Wraith. When you really think about it, William was even involved in the creation of Stitch Wraith, which is pretty astounding and also horrifying. According to the Fazbear Frights book, William was the one responsible for Andrew's death, and Andrew is one of the souls who would go on to possess or become the Stitch Wraith. Initially, Andrew tied himself to William, preventing him from dying in an attempt to torment him. You'd think making your killer immortal would kinda be a bad idea, but I guess Andrew's whole thing was more selfish, not really caring about preventing any further killings or deaths, more wanting to make sure that William lived on so that William could suffer ever more. We learn of Andrew's story in The Man in the Room 1280 from the 5th Fazbear Frights book, Bunny Call. Number 1. Immortal William. Despite the fact that William has seemingly died multiple times, it appears that he must somehow be immortal. Whether that's thanks to Andrew, even after Andrew left him, or is something that William did to himself, or is perhaps just a coincidence. Every time William seemingly dies in the FNAF series, he comes back. He's as resilient as Michael Myers at this point. He just dies and he keeps coming back no matter what. He's been spring-locked, burned alive in a building twice, the second time around seemingly locked up and unable to escape, and yet now he is back as Glitch Trap. This time he has returned through someone scanning a barcode from a Spring Bonnie suit that I suppose he still somehow possessed in some capacity, as it downloaded his spirit, his soul, or his essence into the game, allowing William to live once more. I'm telling you, if you ever think William has finally died, do not believe it, because he hasn't.
In at 9, the Blob. The Blob is an amalgamation of various animatronics that appears in FNAF Security Breach as a secret antagonist. The Blob's main head has a mask identical to that of Funtime Freddy, but with black eyes. It also appears to be some larger version of Molten Freddy after the Pizza Simulator fire, but with more animatronics than those who were present in that fire, somehow. With parts of Baby, the puppet, which were both there, and then Chica, Mangle, Bonnie, and several Endo Mark IIs. But thanks to the Fazbear Frights books, we may know who this mysterious giant blob is, or was going to be revealed to be. While yes, the game released on December 17th, 2021, that was not the original intent. The original intention was for this game to come out in like 2019, I'm pretty sure. But then various delays and expansions to the game ended up causing the game to come out 2 years later. But those game delays didn't delay anything else, which meant that the Fazbear Frights books kept their schedule, and a similar creature ended up appearing in those books, which was ultimately controlled by Elizabeth Afton, who is possessing Baby. So, could this blob be Elizabeth coming back? Or maybe not, since Baby's eyes aren't lit, and it seems to prefer the face of Funtime Freddy. In at 8, Fake Hero. Michael Afton is a troublemaker in my mind, alright? Like, sure, he seems to be playing the good guy going after his father, but really, Michael, to me, just seems fairly entitled. Sure, he says he's trying to right his father's wrongs and whatnot, but looking at him, he's not really doing it because he's a good person. He's doing it because he feels bad, and not because of some higher, noble purpose. He blames himself for getting his brother killed, which is understandable, but also, this subsequently means that anything he does, he's doing to make himself feel better about his mistakes, because in the end, nothing will really bring his little bro back. And he doesn't even really have the gall, the nuts, the cojones to actually stop his father once and for all. He says he's going to come find him, but when he does find him in FNAF 6, he doesn't burn the place to the ground to stop him. Henry's the one who does that. Henry's also the only one willing to sack up and actually try to stop William. And that just shows how not serious Michael is about this. If he really wanted to make sure that William was stopped, he wouldn't have let himself burn in the FNAF 6 fire, okay? But he does. He lets himself burn so that he won't have to feel the regret of hurting his brother and the curse of knowledge since he knows what his father's doing.
Number 7. mission, Michael failed. In the end, Michael failed his mission though to free his sister's spirit. There is an ending where he escapes the facility and his true fate, but we'd also learn that the real ending involved him being harmed simply because he came to try and free his sister. Oh no, just I guess kind of like a wrong place, wrong time scenario. In the ending where you as Michael do survive and get away, it's implied that Circus Baby knows the reason why Michael has come, and actually attempts to bait him from leaving his safe room in order to confront her and attempt to fulfill his mission to save his sister. Either way that you finish the game though, the fact remains that Michael failed to save Elizabeth, who still is trapped within Baby, or I guess what's left of her, by the end of the game. Number 5. William's profession. One of the creepiest things about William Afton, just to begin with, is his involvement in these family restaurants featuring live bands made up of animatronics. Live bands. The fact that he even made animatronics, never mind all the weird mad science that goes with that, is disturbing on its own. I mean, these animatronics all look pretty creepy, and I know all the Freddy chains are meant to be like a place of joy and happiness, at least on paper, but these animatronics do not scream joy and happiness to me. They scream terror, they scream at me to like run for the exit. Everything except joy and happiness really is what they're screaming at me. Also, just sometimes they're just screaming at me because they're jump scaring me. Number 4. William's hobby. One of the scariest truths involving the Afton family is William's role as a killer. I PG-13'd it up and referred to it as his hobby in the title of this point because, well, censorship and such, but it seems as though this hobby is quickly becoming more like his true profession. William has killed multiple people at this point for, well, for a reason we don't really quite fully understand yet. Though I'm sure he has his reasons, right? I mean, he's gotta have reasons, right? Included in the deaths he's had a hand in, albeit likely not directly, are the deaths of his own offspring. All 3 of his kids, if there are 3, I'm pretty sure there's still 3 either way you slice it. Even if Michael is Evan, there's still gotta be an older sibling, and then there's still Elizabeth, so all 3 of his kids seem to have been taken out by animatronics. Although Michael was also weirdly still alive even after his death following sister location, making us wonder just how human he and perhaps his siblings may really be. Maybe they were never human children. Maybe they were all robots.
Getting close to the end into number 3, Glamrock Freddy. There is a popular theory going around that once again people are treating as fact. The idea that Glamrock Freddy is possessed by Michael Afton after the FNAF 6 fire. That his soul went on to possess the Freddy animatronics somehow after the place, and he himself burned to a crisp. Since Glamrock Freddy does give off a overprotective big brother vibe, that juxtaposes well with the crying child vibes that Gregory gives off. However, I personally don't really think that this is true, at least for the moment. I'd love for it to be true, but for the sake of devil's advocate, let's think about that. While it would make sense from a literary standpoint, the rules that Scott has established in this universe wouldn't allow for this, because the games and the books have made it seem like Remnant can be burned away with fire. And while this may be false, see William Afton lied to us about Remnant for more information on that, links in the iCard, fire would still help in preventing the creation of Remnant. That's the conclusion I came to in that video. Thus preventing Michael from actually creating Remnant and latching onto something, especially something that showed up after a whole mall complex was built on top of where he died. It seems like a bit of a stretch to me. And I'm the guy who swore up and down that Michael was a rebuilt crying child, and I'm saying that this is a leap in logic, alright? I mean, I still think that that could be possible, but like less so now, but ultimately, in number 2, the one you should not have killed. I adamantly stand by my stance that crying child is the one you should not have killed. And I know that it goes against what MatPat says, but I truly believe that there is more evidence for this than there is for Cassidy being the one you should not have killed. And MatPat, if you want to talk about it, hit me up. We can figure this out together. We know that Crying Child dies in 1983, which is the same year that Charlotte ends up dying and possessing the puppet. However, we only know of 7 animatronics that definitely existed at this time. The 4 from sister location that made up Circus Baby's entertainment and rental, Funtime Freddy, Funtime Foxy, Baby, and Ballora, and then possibly Funtime Chica, but that's a whole other thing. Since those are said to be some of the first robots that were made according to the FNAF AR Fast Facts, the Spring Bonnie and Spring Freddy animatronics that are used in FNAF 4's location, and the Freddy used in the location that Charlotte is watching from the outside when she gets killed. There is no clear golden Freddy that Crying Child could have possessed, not taking into account potentially Fredbear being golden Freddy, but proportions kind of negate that. The other minigames from FNAF 2 don't count as well, since we can't really be sure what year they take place in. And aside from no Golden Freddy, there is no animatronic around for Crying Child to possess when he dies in the hospital. Unless William is just the absolutely god-awful, most atrocious father, and the hospital would not have let that happen, just saying. And finally, into number 1, Bonnie. This is an interesting theory from Reddit user Was That the Bite of _87 on the Game Theorist subreddit. The post didn't get much love, but it was certainly interesting. Was That the Bite of 87 asks if the Burn Trap animatronic is using the disassembled Bonnie endoskeleton. Quote from the Reddit post, "So I have a theory that Burn Trap is using the disassembled Bonnie robot. Let me explain. So you know how Burn Trap has an intact animatronic foot even though no other Springtrap or Scraptrap ever had them? Management might have disabled Bonnie, and there could have been a body of a Glitch Trap infected person in there, which explains the dead rotting corpse, and Afton could have taken over but is weak, which explains why he still needs a recharge station. That is all I have for now." And you know what? This is actually pretty decent, and MapHat also talked about this theory. However, considering how Afton's body is in the robot, I don't even think that he using someone like possessed by a Glitch Trap, I don't think that he would move his corpse. I feel like that's a bit of a stretch. Like, it wouldn't really be necessary if his consciousness is in Glitch Trap. And I don't think that any reluctant follower would be willing to move a rotting corpse. You know? Like, if Afton's body wasn't in the robot, I feel like this would be really solid, but even if he has claws, his body being in the suit proves that it's Scraptrap. I feel like it kind of has, because he was shoved full of robot bits. So how is he removed from the suit? I don't get it. And at 9, Witness. The unfortunate scooping of Elizabeth Afton is really what ended up changing William's motives. At least we think so. Since in the novels, once he sees the original animatronics possessed, his goal changes to search for eternal life and making himself immortal. But in the games, could it have been that the baby scooping is what changed him? I mean, it would make sense, especially with the fact that Crying Child, one of William's other kids, may have seen it happen. It would explain a lot if Crying Child did indeed see the scooping. The stomach mouths on the nightmare animatronics, William keeping an eye on him using cameras and stuffed animals with security cameras and speakers inside, and this could be the moment that William learns about possession and that somehow his daughter was kept alive inside the animatronic, hence why he says, "I will put you back together," when his son is dying after pulling the plug. He thinks that he can save him like how his daughter stays alive in Baby. Little does he know that you need agony to allow for possession, which only happens at the moment of death, not after. And at 8, Mustard Man. The most confusing part of FNAF 6 has got to be the fan named Mustard Man from the Midnight Motorist minigame. No character until this point has been identified with the color orange. It was even made explicitly clear in the Freddy Files Updated Edition book that your character in the minigame is orange, not purple, which leads me to believe that maybe this scene is more than we originally thought. Now, there are 2 groups of people for this character. One group that believes that this is William Afton before remnant injections or something like that, before becoming the shadow of the man he once was, and the other thinks that this could in fact be Henry Emily, the father of Charlotte, in the security puppet minigame from that same game, which could also help support this theory. There isn't really much to go off of, only that this may be William because of the 2 sons, one watching TV wearing a gray shirt like Mike from the FNAF 4 minigames, who goes home to watch Immortal and the Restless after work in sister location, and the similarity of the Mustard Man color with the "I will put you back together" color text from FNAF 4. But it may also be Henry's home because of the footprints outside the window, which look an awful lot like Glitch Trap's feet, although this could just be a twisted animatronic or something similar. Yet we never heard about Henry having more kids than Charlotte, not even in the novels, so I don't know. What side are you on? Are you on Team Afton or Team Emily? Let me know in the comments. And at 7, Golden Freddy. Some people believe that the one possessing Golden Freddy is Crying Child. This is mostly based on the It's Me hallucinations from FNAF 1 and the reveal that the older brother has been our player character over the first 6 games in the series, excluding FNAF 4 and potentially others depending on things that get revealed later on. So why would people believe this? Well, it's because it would explain Golden Freddy's signature line of "It's me." Since if we do play as Michael Afton in the first game, "It's me" could just end up being Crying Child trying to communicate with his older brother as to who he is. It could also explain the constant use of the phrase "It's me" in the security logbook, since some also believe it to be possessed by the spirit of Golden Freddy, or the 2 spirits inside the book are also those inside Golden Freddy, which makes no sense to me because why would 2 people be possessing multiple things and the same 2 things at that? Anyway, with the line of "It's me" being explained easily with the Crying Child being Golden Freddy, it leads to some to the conclusion that that must must be the way Scott intended it, but hey, what do I know? It's not like I've made 365 FNAF videos on my own. Oh wait, this is the 366th. Not even kidding, I counted. I'm being legit. Like, this is my 366th FNAF video. And at 6, Imposter. Sus. Some thoroughly believe that this burn trap animatronic, this new version of the Spring Bonnie animatronic, to not be William Afton, and instead possibly Henry Emily, William's business partner and the father of his first victim. Why do they think this? No idea. However, I can kind of see why, but it would simply just be due to inconsistencies. Since seemingly the endo for this version of Springtrap also has the same endo as the Glamrock animatronics, or the ones that we see in what is honestly the scariest part of the game. At least they look similar. Since if this was Afton, the endo should technically be the first version of the endoskeleton. My explanation for this is simply because they had to model this endo for the files, and they were kind of in a rush to release something after already delaying the game multiple times, so they used just the normal endo that they already had and then added some Springtrap bits onto him. And since he's so destroyed, it's really difficult to determine whether it's the same design as Scraptrap or not, and since Henry was also in the FNAF 6 location, potentially it could have been him. But again, I doubt it. And at 4, Vanessa. In the best ending, there are quite a few confusing moments. The most confusing one, for me at least, is the idea that Gregory would go get ice cream with Vanessa when she's done trying to kill him. Because, you know, all of a sudden she hasn't been trying to kill you for 6 hours. Why would you do that? Some seem to think that it's because they're related or representing the dead Afton kids. And thanks to MapHat, there's a little more evidence to this theory. The ice cream that Vanessa gets while on the hill in the best ending is very reminiscent of the ice cream cone that lured Elizabeth into Baby's arm grabbing or scooping range, I guess, however you want to say it. I feel like scooping is kind of more accurate considering how we're talking about ice cream here, but hey. There's a cone with ice cream on top, and while it's not the same design, this time around it's mint chocolate chip. I mean, I feel like ice cream in general, we've only seen ice cream these 2 times, so yeah, I feel like it's a good thing. I feel like that's a good comparison. Getting close to the end in number 3, cheating. Now, what if instead the kids weren't kidnapped, but instead illegitimate? Once upon a time, I had a theory that Clara from The Immortal and the Restless didn't represent the wife, but instead Henry's wife, and I had quite a bit of evidence and logic to back it up. In short, Clara is meant to be William's mistress. As I just mentioned, it's in the Freddy files, but Clara seems to share a few similarities with Henry as well. Burning down Vlad's house, which Henry does countless times, well, not his house, but you know what I mean, as well as demanding he take more responsibility, which Henry could have been doing in reference to the business, their baby. But ultimately, the baby they have in the show is biological, and his mistress ultimately rejecting him to stay with her husband could have been the stressor William needed to flip his lid, killing kids since they represent why Clara would have stayed with Henry, and then getting the child that actually caused her to stay, Charlotte. And Clara knew that they were in danger, so she told Henry everything, causing him to take precautions for his daughter in the form of the security puppet without making his daughter freak out, letting her still live a normal life while he knew that the puppet would protect her. Well, until it didn't. Penultimately, in at number 2, MikeBot. Michael Afton as a robot has been proposed as an idea since the release of The Fourth Closet, and honestly, to me, it still makes a lot of sense. William could have wanted another son, one that would look just like him instead of the mother, or that didn't come from the woman who broke his heart, or maybe someone to just look after the kids while he went to work, so he made Michael. This is only enhanced by Sister Location, where Michael is somehow able to survive being scooped and stuffed like a Thanksgiving turkey key with Ennard, and then somehow able to survive vomiting it out of his throat. That entire 6'2" hunk of metal being ejected out your throat with no warning, no lube, no spit, just metal tearing through your esophagus. Michael even admits in the final monologue that he should be dead, but he's not, and Baby knew that he wouldn't die. How could this make sense? Honestly, at this point, only if he was a robot. It also explains how Ennard would have been able to put himself inside his body, he wrapped around the endoskeleton, and why he couldn't only die in the FNAF 6 fire. All signs point to Mike being a robot, so what could get any more intense than that? Actually, finally, in at number 1, robots. A whole family of robots, of course. Think about it. Eventually, all of the Afton family members end up becoming robots in some way or another, right? Let's go down the list. Mike was either always a robot or gets controlled by Ennard, who is a robot. Elizabeth gets scooped by Baby and possesses her. William gets spring-locked and becomes Springtrap and later Scraptrap. Crying Child either possesses Golden Freddy or his father, becoming an animatronic through Springtrap while keeping his father alive in that suit. And the mother is represented by Ballora, who also ends up getting shoved into Michael. Also, this whole family dynamic is weird, honestly. Like, they literally made Mike's sister shove herself inside of him. And the whole like ships thing between these characters is wrong. Don't get me started on that. I'm glad I didn't have to make that list. Amanda also thinks that maybe all the Afton kids were robots, but I feel like that's disproven by Elizabeth possessing Baby, unless she was the only actual biological kid. Crying Child's circuits getting crushed by Fredbear makes more sense than his skull though, just saying.